Hello and welcome to the Outdoorsy Educator podcast, where learning gets a breath of fresh air. I'm your host Alasdair, and each week I talk with people from all walks of life to explore how education, the outdoors, and real-world experiences shape who we are. From classrooms to campfires, trails to town halls, we dig into the lessons that move us, challenge us, stick with us, and can make the world a better place. And on this week's episode of the Outdoorsy Educator podcast, we have Dr. Annie Munson. Annie, how are you today?
I am just doing fabulous.
Wonderful. Well, we work at the same university. We're both here at Texas Women's University, but our paths only fairly recently crossed as I was preparing to present at our TEDx event. And I couldn't be happier that our paths did indeed cross, because I've got a funny feeling you have some wonderful stories to share with us. But before we get into those, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So I have worked at Texas Women's University for 18 years, going on 19, very close to 19 years. And I currently am the executive director for international affairs. And the easiest way to explain what that means is that my department kind of oversees all things international. Some things we are directly responsible for, and then there are a handful of other things that we are a touch point or a resource to help support other international efforts that are going on around the university. So it's a very interesting role to be in, and we see lots of exciting and different things all the time, as you can imagine.
Yes, and absolutely. I can imagine just the stories and the lives that you're touching with this work. Is it mostly students who are going to study abroad, or is it students coming in to study at TWU, or a bit of both?
It's both,
Right.
absolutely. So we have direct oversight for our students who are studying abroad, going other places in the world for a short period of time, 2 weeks, or up to, a full year, really. And then we also have direct oversight for our international students that are coming here to earn a degree. So students from around the world coming to Texas Women's University to earn their full degree. And we have students from like 52 different countries right now. So we have, pretty wide, diverse population coming to this amazing university to earn one of our amazing degrees.
I had no idea it was that many, because I mean, just in terms of numbers, Texas Women's University is not a huge place. I mean, it's not small by any stretch, but it's not a massive. That's a lot, lots of countries.
Yeah, it really is. We're really lucky to have that kind of diversity. We're bringing the world to our students here on campus
Mhm.
through our international students, which is really, it's incredible.
I haven't seen it this year, but last year on campus, it always just made me smile when I pulled in the morning. I would drive past or ride my bike past the student parking, and there was somebody with a personalized vanity license plate, and they said Kiwi something, and they had New Zealand stickers on their car, and
I
it
love
always
that.
made me smile, just thinking
Yeah.
our little dot on the map here in Denton, Texas, and the world is coming to us.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really
yes.
amazing, and it's really, it's just an opportunity for all of us to learn things and get exposed to people and cultures and ways of being and food and all these things that we might not get exposed to otherwise, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes we can go out into the world, but it's equally as valuable, I find, when the world comes to us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But you've not always been in academia. I was fascinated to learn you had, I don't know if I think it's fair to call it a previous career in the media. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and what you did?
Absolutely. I started out, well, my bachelor's degree is in communication with an emphasis in radio television. And so I started out at a news station as a reporter and fill-in anchor. And, I was it's just famous, right? No, that's not
Right.
how that works. But so yeah, I kind of fell into that career path in a really kind of interesting way, and I'll tell you that story really quickly. My senior year of high school, I was I was very involved in high school. It's just, lots of things, anything, any organization or any club or anything I could do. I'm like, yes, I want to do that. And one of the things I volunteered for was to help with like the senior night, the senior graduation night.
Yes.
And my role was to go and promote this event um, through the media and for fundraising, and I don't know, I can't remember all the purposes, but I had an interview I was doing at our local TV station, one of our local TV stations, and the director of the news director was the person interviewing me. So the noon TV show, so kind of soft
Right.
news, right? And so he interviewed me, asked me about the event, so on and so forth. At the end of it, he said, "What are you doing for college? And what are you planning on studying?" And I said, "Well, I haven't, I'm undecided. I'm going to get to college and kind of figure it out." And he said, "You should go into the news business. Like, you did a really great job on this interview. Have you ever thought about that?" And of course I had not. And
Right.
so he said, "Why don't you intern here at the TV station and just see if it's a career path that you want?" And so I did intern there, and it was so intimidating, but it was fast paced and exciting. And so that's exactly what I did. That's the major that I chose, and earned my bachelor's degree so that I could, go into that field. So that's kind of how I landed there.
And where was this, if you don't mind me asking? Was this local here? I've got a funny feeling you are from up north somewhere.
Okay, so I love that you
Yes.
say this because
Yeah.
I'm from Indiana, but we
Right.
moved to Texas when I was 10 years old. So I've been in Texas longer than I've been anywhere else. So this was actually in Odessa, Texas. And that's where I
Right.
grew up, was in West Texas, in Odessa, Texas. But I don't have a super strong Texas accent, or at least I don't think I do. But I think that part of that is part of my Indiana roots. But also, when I was in college, we had elements of our coursework that helped us kind of have a generic sort of sound, right? That you didn't
Yes.
necessarily have a very distinct accent. So there were exercises and different things that we did to kind of sound
Yes.
neutral.
You definitely don't sound like you spent your formative years in Odessa. We can say
Okay,
that.
well, there you go.
It's fun. It's a complete sidetrack. I was actually having a conversation with my dad the other day. I bought a pile of records. Just somebody was selling a whole bunch of them, and one of them was news reports from give or take 100 years ago. Kind of went through World War
Wow.
One, World War Two, and we were my dad's in academia, and we were just talking about the different accents, and not necessarily an English accent or an American accent, but really a newsreader's accent, and how it's
Right,
changed over the last 100 years. What's expected of a newscaster,
right.
how that sort of thing, and it was so it's really interesting to hear that there is that sort of neutrality.
Yeah.
Um,
And this was in the 90s. So who knows? I mean, like,
yes,
who knows what there may be there may be more space for people to just have the accent that they have. I mean, I don't know
right,
today, but, and by the way, I love accents. So
right.
I'm like, why can't I have a really cool accent? But maybe someone somewhere thinks I do. I don't
Well, that's
know.
the thing. People have said that to me most of my
Right,
life, and I always say you have a cool accent. You're just maybe not in the right place for it to
right.
shine. You just need to go
That's
somewhere
exactly right.
else.
That's
Then you
exactly
have
right.
the cool accent. I go home, I don't have an accent.
That's
So
right.
that's what it is. Yeah, I find it very interesting. I've got it, yeah, as an interest in accents in the sense of how they've developed,
Right.
and my dad, literally in this conversation that I mentioned the other day, my dad and I were talking about how two people on the same street can grow up with different accents, and
Absolutely.
and the why behind that, and it's
Yeah.
something I'd like to dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating.
Yes. So you spent part of your career in the media, and then how did the transition happen from that into academia?
Yeah. So there's so many things I loved about being in television news. And then there were so many things that did not align well with who I am as a person. So, for example, I love working with other people. I'm very collaborative, and that industry at the time And maybe it was the TV stations that I worked at. There was not a whole lot of collaboration. It was like you identify your stories, you go get your stories, you write your stories, you read your stories, that sort of thing. Very
Right.
independent, um, which was fine. I mean, I learned a lot from that, and there are elements
Hmm.
of that that I enjoyed. But in addition, if you think about what it is that we see or hear when we're watching or listening to the news, there's a lot of heavy stuff, right?
Right.
A lot of heavy stuff. And so there was a point where I just felt like, oh, this is not, it's just not feeding my soul. It was
Right.
just, crime, war, politics, death. I mean, it was just seldom that you got to do the warm, fuzzy stuff. Now, there are certain areas in media where I could have moved into to do that warm, fuzzy stuff. But at the time, I thought, I am going to explore a different avenue with my degree. And I moved into a public relations position. So I moved out of the news business into a public relations position for a nonprofit organization. So instead of being the one interviewing, I was now being interviewed and
Hmm.
promoting this organization. And it just felt so good. I was like, okay, this is more my style, right?
Right.
Because I knew the work that I was doing was impacting people's lives in a positive way. But I still got to use my writing skills and my communication skills and all of those things. So um, this is kind of where I know you're going to ask me about some travel components in my life, but
Hmm.
it was that time in my life where after I worked for this public relations role for a while, I mean, I was 25 and I
Hmm.
thought, is this all there is to life? Going to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and being done at 5 o'clock. And like, is this really what life is going to look like forevermore? And that's when I kind of started questioning, maybe I should just do something really different and take advantage of being young and single and all of these things and go travel. And so we'll talk about that in a minute, but took a little, sabbatical. And when I came
Right.
back from that, then I was ready and I had some clarity about where am I headed. I went back to get my master's degree. After my master's degree, I got a job in higher education. And then, I've been in higher education ever since, eventually earned my doctorate, and here I am. So that's the very quick version of that story.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that with newscasters and reporters. I think that's interesting. Yeah, my mum, my sister, they're both nurses, and I think sometimes about the mental toll.
Yeah.
It's not just the mechanics of being a nurse, but you how to leave that at work. And I
Yeah.
am sure there's systems in places for people in the healthcare field, to help with that. But it must be quite a burden on a lot of people working in the media because I'm sure you do see the worst of the worst. And
Right.
being able to leave that at work must be really difficult to do.
It just is, it's a career where you have to carry some heavy stuff emotionally and the hours are difficult. And if you think about, I I now have said this to my children, and I said I wish someone would have said this to me, but I never thought about what would it look like, what would my day look like working as a reporter, right? And I either worked the morning shift, which that I had to be there at like 4 o'clock in the morning when I did
Right.
that, right? Which meant going to bed at like 8 or 9 at night. And so, or I worked the evening shift,
Hmm.
where I came in at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I wasn't done until 11 or later. I mean, there are some other shifts that are a little more reasonable, but I just thought, no one ever told me what it would look like, or I never asked what it would look like, and so
Right.
that there were elements of like that as well, like the actual just um, structure. But I was like, I don't know that this is going to work for me long term, if
Right. Yeah.
so
I could only imagine you can only do that for, I mean, I'm sure there's some people who could do it for decades, but
right.
you got to be burning the candle at both ends most of the time,
Right.
I would
Yeah. And
imagine.
it's about like what works for you. I mean, there are
Hmm.
obviously plenty of people, that's their jam and that's great. But, it became clear to me. I wanted to explore and see, are there other things that align better with who I am and how I walk through the world? And you know what? Turns out there are.
Turns out you might just have found it, which I
Right,
love.
exactly.
Yeah, so you mentioned a sabbatical, and that's when we talked in person. That was what made my ears perk up.
Yeah,
And coincidentally, I spoke to somebody yesterday, well, two people, a Dutch couple who are currently on sabbatical, and they are living in a van for a year.
right.
And it will actually be the previous week's episode to this. And and it was fascinating hearing about that break from work. Talk me through that journey of your sabbatical, and then we'll get into where you went.
Sure, absolutely. So again, I'm 25 years old, working in public relations and loving that job, but also just kind of thinking, like, where am I headed in life? What's this going to look like? How am I going to have some meaningful experiences? How do I make the most of my life? And I have a very, very dear friend who has just really been almost like a muse to me through, we met in college, and he is from South Africa. And so we were just chatting one day, and I'm, pondering all of these things with him. We get very intellectual when we chat. And he said, Annie, you should travel. Like, you should travel. You should go and see the world, and you can come back and figure out where your career is headed. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this sounds lovely,
Hmm.
but I mean, I have bills, I have an apartment, rent, I've got,
Right,
a car payment. I mean, like, I'm an adult. I've got all the things now
right.
that we work toward having. And so he said, well, you know what? Figure it out. If you can get yourself to Cape Town, South Africa, I've got a place for you to stay and I've got a car for you to drive. And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, why not? Right? Why not? So I sold my car. I mean, this is the universe telling me that I needed to do this. I went and looked
Hmm.
at my apartment lease to figure out, okay, like, what do I have to do to get out of this lease? Well, they had put the wrong date on my apartment lease, and that they put like the end date as the same date as the start date, right? So I mean, my lease was never valid. I didn't even know
Right.
this until I looked. And then I was like, great. And so I mean, I didn't have to pay anything or do anything to get out of my lease. I was like, oh, looks like the lease is over. I'm out.
Yep.
Um, I had a big yard sale and like sold everything that I owned that wasn't sentimental. So I'd
Hmm.
have some cash in my pocket. And then I just, got a ticket to Cape Town, South Africa, a one-way ticket. And I was like, here I go. So I, my friend was not in Cape Town at the time, but
Hmm.
he had some friends that lived there, and they had a space for me to stay. And my friend's car was there, and so his buddies had the keys to that car. So he said, just get yourself to the airport, look for a guy holding a sign with your name, and that's my friend Andrew, and he'll take you to and figure it out. And I'm like, okay, great. So I did just that. And it just kind of launched me into this experience that truly, undeniably transformed me as a human. Like, it's hard for me to even put into words.
Now, was this your first time traveling like that, internationally? And it's not a typical destination, South
Right.
Africa,
Right.
for a first place to go.
Absolutely. Now, I
Yes.
had been out of the country. I'd been to Canada and Mexico, right?
Right.
So, oh, and actually I'd been to England as well. But I had done all of those things with other people, right? Or
Right.
I had flown somewhere to meet other people. But this was solo, right? I mean,
It's
this
different.
I knew my friend's name is Russell, and I knew Russell was, had these connections for me in Cape Town, but they weren't going to like entertain me. They were just going to get me from the airport to the house,
Right.
and then I'm on my own, right? So it was definitely the first time, and this was in 1998. Okay, so no, 99, not definitely 99. And so yeah, so I mean, there's no cell phones. If I
Hmm.
wanted to use the internet, I had to go to an internet cafe and pay
Yeah.
per minute, right, for the
Yep.
internet. So it was different. a little bit of a different experience for sure.
Yes. And started traveling independently a bit around that time. And I guess every generation says this. I'm actually really glad that was my experience.
Yeah.
Um, having to physically look at the guidebook and
Oh yeah,
things like
absolutely.
that,
Yeah.
rather than having everything in my pocket. As
Yeah.
wonderful and as convenient and all of that, I'm really glad I had that formative experience that sounds similar to you.
Oh, absolutely.
And then so you're in Cape Town, you've landed there. Start walking us through this wonderful journey.
Oh gosh. So
Yes.
the day I arrived, I mean, it's a long flight. Okay.
Right.
Very long. And so
Yes.
the day I arrived, I walk, out, I get off the airplane, I walk to try and find Andrew. And I remember, I mean, it was so different. Talk about culture shock, right? I mean, there's a lot of
Hmm.
culture shock going on. And I remember thinking, what have I done? Why is this girl from Texas, you know, why have I landed myself here in Cape Town, South Africa? But that lasted for about, you know, 3 minutes, right? Until I kind of gathered myself and I just felt like this extreme excitement about this is the adventure of a lifetime. And I'm gonna wrap my arms around it. And it's just, I'm just gonna see what it has, what it brings to me. So, I took probably the first, I don't know, week or two trying to get myself just familiar with my surroundings and, okay, I'm driving a car on the other side of the
I was
road,
going to
all
ask
new to me.
when you said
And
Russell had a car, I was going to ask you about that. Yes.
And not only am I driving on the other side of the road, it is a manual. All right. Now, I did know how to drive a manual, so certainly know how to do that. But now I'm like shifting with my
The
my
other
left
hand.
hand instead of
Yeah.
my right hand, which I am very right-handed. So, I mean, so many experiences. Having to figure out where am I gonna get food from, and like certainly certain things are familiar, lots of things that are unfamiliar.
Hmm.
So, just getting some grounding and getting some foundation for the first few weeks. But then I decided, I'm here. I'm just going to start checking stuff out. So I started driving around and just going as many places as I could on day trips.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
and then I eventually thought, I'm gonna do some bigger explorations. And so I found a group that, um, it was we literally rode in seats that were bolted in the back of a truck that had like a canopy over it. So, safari sort of thing. But we literally
Right.
rode in the back of that from place to place to place to place through Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. I mean, like this, it was probably maybe 3 months or almost close to a month worth of travel, where we
Right.
camped at night and we were in the back of this truck riding from spot to spot, when we weren't camping, exploring, whatever. So I I engaged in that, and that took me through all these other countries. And when I came back into South Africa, I connected with some of Russell's family, and then another, in Johannesburg, I connected with some of his friends in Durban, and then eventually made my way back down to Cape Town. So this whole big adventure was about 3 months in
It's
total.
just fascinating. And you've already alluded to the fact, of course, there's going to be many new things.
Mhm.
Uh, Is there anything that particularly stands out for you as a I'm not in Odessa anymore kind of moment?
Oh my gosh, just every second of it. I mean,
Right.
the landscape is just beautiful and so diverse through all of those countries. And I mean, just really every second of it. And I think there were so many moments where even small things
Mhm.
helped me recognize or learn or identify something about myself I just hadn't noticed before, and I mean, that's why when I say like it was transformative, it's just
Yes.
I came back an absolutely different person.
In what way? Because I've got no
Yeah.
doubt you did, but I'd love to dig
Yeah.
into that just a little bit, how it transformed you.
So one one example, and
Hmm.
this seems so simple, but I, driving on the other side of the road and navigating all the places I went to, I would arrive someplace, again, no internet, right? I mean, no cell phone navigating me there. I'm looking at maps, paper maps,
Hmm.
right? And I would arrive someplace and I would think to myself, I got here. Like I got myself from point A to point B. And I mean, something seems so simple, but I felt like this, I can I can do complex, unfamiliar, uncertain things. Look at me. I can do something that um, seems challenging, and and I can do it successfully. Another example, and this is probably a more profound sort of moment. I remember I think I was in Namibia, and I remember seeing some children playing, and their toys were made out of what my perspective was at the time was trash, right? So
Hmm.
tin cans, cardboard, wires, whatever. And I saw these children playing with these toys, and my instinctual reaction was in my head, I did not say this out loud,
Of
thank
course.
goodness. Oh, how sad their toys are made of trash.
Hmm.
However, in the next breath, my all of a sudden I had this like thought where I was like, wait a second. This is such a US centric view. Just because they're not made out of plastic and they don't say, Tonka on them or whatever.
Right.
I stopped and I thought, these children are happy and they are loving the games that they're playing. And how incredible that they are repurposing things that we would just toss out and think
Hmm.
have zero value. And how incredibly creative that they could take a tin can and make it into wheels on a truck that they've made and attach a wire to it and be able to drive this truck around. So it was like in that moment that I thought, oh, I need to be very aware of not looking at things through a US centric lens, but also having the attitude of different can just be different. Doesn't have to be good or bad.
Hmm.
I don't have to put a value judgment on something. It can just be different, and accepting it for what it is and trying to ask the question of why and understand it. And there's just so much more value in that. And I mean that attitude, it can be applied to so many things. And it has
Right.
created a space for me to be so much more open and understanding and accepting and curious. And it has just, I mean, that is one of those, it's probably one of the most profound things that I can tell a story about that gives you an example of what I'm talking about. But there's so many things like that: food, clothing, ways of being, ways of living. I mean, all of these things. It's just really incredible.
I love it. It just reminds me of, and the quote is attributed to somebody else, but the television, the Apple show Ted Lasso, and he talks about being curious, not judgmental. And it
Yes.
sounds like not that you were necessarily being judgmental in a negative way, but that shift of
Yeah.
just curiosity. It does
Right.
wonders for us, I think, when we can look at life through that lens.
Yeah, and being aware of your lens. I mean, that's the thing for
Yes.
me is that like I just didn't have an awareness of my lens until I had an awareness of my lens. And then I
Yes.
had to be, I just made a decision in the moment. I am going to be intentional about being aware of my lens and trying to change my lens and asking questions and expanding and broadening my view. And I mean, it's just been really something that has changed the direction of my life because I had that awareness.
I love it. And you've done something and said something that you maybe didn't realize, maybe you did, There's actually a very common thread amongst people I talk to. And just for the podcast and in life, there's three sentences that come up a lot when I talk to people about travel. And they start with, it was so simple, it was so silly, or it was so small.
Right.
And you said one of those because what I've found, and this has surprised me the longer I do this, when I talk to people who have been to incredible places all over the world, they usually don't talk about the thing they often went to see. People who went to South America and they've seen Machu Picchu,
Right.
yeah, that was amazing. But let me tell you about the people. Let me tell you
Right.
about the
Right.
food we ate. Let me tell you about the bus ride up the hill.
Yeah.
And it truly is those small moments that stick with us. Yes, going to Paris and seeing the Eiffel Tower is amazing, but
Right.
it was that meal, it was that conversation you listen to, having a coffee. Those things I find are what stick with people, and it seems like that's happened with you.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think that's another element that came out of this experience. Although this has always been part of who I am, it really I don't know, caused this element of me to blossom and grow, and it became foundational in who I am. But that I don't, I've never been someone who really was into material things. I
Mhm.
have always had this value of having a connection to people and nature and such. So, when I travel, I want to connect with the people and the
Mhm.
place. I don't necessarily want to see all the touristy stuff. I mean, I can see it, but I don't want to spend all my time there because
Right.
for me, I want to get a sense of what it's like to live there. It's hard when you're doing
Yeah.
a like short visit somewhere, right? But if you can just get a
Hmm.
little window into and and connecting with nature is super, super important to me. And those things don't it doesn't take a lot of money to do that when you're traveling, right? To wander
Right.
around and see the natural beauty, and to have a to make your own meal because you went to the grocery store and got the food from there and that sort of thing. So that, certainly I already had some elements of who I am and how I operated that aligned with that. But being in Africa and all these countries in Africa just really reinforced that that's the way that I enjoy travel.
100%. I had a friend, and this is going back 20 years, and he went to London. And yes, he did see a couple of the touristy things, but before he went, he made a decision. He was going to get on the subway each day and ride to
Mhm.
the very last stop of each line and just
Yes.
get out, and that he was going to find somewhere to eat and
Yes.
just walk around because that's where the people are.
I have done that
Yeah.
so many times
Uh,
in the US and
hmm.
in other places. Yes, you go to the end of the line, and
Yeah.
that's where you start to see what real life looks like. It's the best. And you find the best restaurants there as well.
Right, because of the restaurants for the people who live
That's right.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. See, you come back to Texas in your own words, a different person.
right.
How does this transcended into your current career? Because you
Hmm.
can't leave that part of your life behind because it's going to change you. How has it changed the way you work and live today?
Yeah, I wish I could remember the moment, but I remember being in Africa and thinking every woman needs to travel solo. And I'm going to find a way to support women in travel, connect with women who want to travel. I mean, I didn't know what it would look like, right? But I mean, I remember having this thought, like, I have to do more with this for other women, right? So I come
Yes.
back to Texas. I get a couple of different jobs just trying to, get some money and get my feet back underneath me. I eventually go back and get my master's degree. Um, and and that leads me to working in higher education. Um, I when I came to TWU, I was working as an adjunct
Hmm?
teaching, and then eventually moved into a role in student life, student affairs. And so supporting students through a variety of services. And that is the part of my career that I think started to put me on the path. Well, I know it definitely started to put me on the path to where I am today. So in student life, I wasn't doing anything related to international, but I was working at a women's university, right?
Hmm.
So I'm starting to fulfill part of that vision, right? Where I'm working with women and supporting women. Um, and and eventually, because I went back and or was getting my doctorate, it opened up some other career opportunities at TWU. And one of those was working in international. It was a new role that TWU was creating that hadn't existed before. And because I was close to finishing my doctorate, I almost had the
Hmm.
credential to qualify me for it. So
Right.
somebody said, you should apply for this. And I thought, well, I'm sure they're going to be looking for someone who actually has experience working in international. And my colleague was like, no, they're building a new area. I had done some things in my previous role where I was kind of building and growing some aspects of that role that had never been there before. And so my colleague was like, you have done some building and growing. You're just going to do that now in a different context. And I thought, well, okay. So
Right.
tossed my name in the hat and 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 they picked me, and
They-
truly when I talked to my former boss about like why did you hire me, she's like, because I had seen that you could build and grow an area and I needed you to build and grow a department. So so there I am. I've landed in this role where I'm working with women and I'm helping them get exposed to the world either by traveling abroad or bringing others here. And for our international students, when they come here, this is their study abroad, right?
right.
So yeah, that's kind of how I landed in that role, and it just was able to fulfill this vision I had, I suppose, when I was in Africa.
I love it. It's so much of what you're saying resonates with a conversation I had maybe 2 months ago with a wonderful woman called Amanda Black. And she was in Australia, and I might get the details a little fuzzy. She was there and she's from California, lived in Australia for a couple of years and was broke, wanted to travel. And she found that there was a gap in the market for women who they weren't necessarily, I can't remember how she phrased it beautifully. They weren't like scared to travel, but it just
Right,
felt a bit intimidating.
right.
So she arranged a group trip, I think, to Bali.
Mhm.
And, she thought, I think the story goes that if she could get 10 or 12 people to pay, it would kind of offset her cost.
Right.
And she would run, and she now runs a very successful company called the Solo Female Travel Network. And it's
Yes.
about linking women together
Yeah.
to travel. And again, they go to the most incredible places. But
Yes.
that's not what sticks. It's this sisterhood and the
That's right.
relationships.
That's right.
Um, so I
Yeah.
love how that similar story tends to transcend.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I
That
think
makes
it's
perfect sense.
I think it's just a beautiful thing. So if there's somebody listening who thinks, I need to travel before I get, the house, the mortgage, the kids, the this, the if that's
Right.
something that they're thinking they would like to do, what advice would you have for them?
Well, I always say you can spend a lot of money to travel, or you can be pretty cost conscious, right?
Hmm.
So keep it simple. Find some place that you can go to fairly inexpensively that feels relatively comfortable. So maybe if going to a place that the primary language is a language that you don't speak, that
Hmm.
feels too uncomfortable, then don't do that, right? Go someplace where they speak your primary language. Stay in a hostel. People,
Hmm.
are always like, oh, hostels. I'm like, no, this is like the best place, especially if you're traveling
Yes.
solo.
Yep.
Like you meet instant friends, right?
Yep.
Instant travel companions that you can wander around with. It's just such an incredible experience. People from all over the world and and eat from the grocery store, right? I mean, so there's just these ways that you can kind of keep the cost manageable. And I know cost is just one element, but it's often an element that we hear people saying, this is my obstacle.
Yes.
If fear or uncertainty are your obstacles, well, you know what? That's okay. That's
Hmm.
really normal. And I challenge you to think about all the times that you have been uncertain, afraid, uncomfortable, and you've pressed on through it. And what did it look like on the other side? I used to, there's so many times in my life where I was kind of a scaredy cat, believe it or
Hmm.
not. Like as a child, I was a total scaredy cat about so many things. And I just got to a point in my life where I thought everything I want is on the other side of this fear.
Hmm.
And so I've just got to get past it and I'm going to get to where I want to go. And so if you can just remind yourself of all the times you've done something that was uncomfortable, all these you've gotten past these feelings that are holding you back. Um, I mean, we've all done that in small ways
Right.
and in big ways. We just have to remind ourselves. Then you can do it again, right? You can do it in a different context. You can use those skills that you used last time to get past that, to get past it this time. And maybe you don't want to travel solo. Maybe if that's just too much for
Right.
you go with a buddy and go, again, go someplace that's easy to get to, seems relatively familiar, and you just start building your confidence and your understanding and your abilities, and then you're off. Like then there's no stopping you.
I love it. I love it. It's I mean, sage advice not just for travel, but even just day to day, trying just to get to that other side of fear. Amazing things can
Absolutely.
happen.
That is
Yeah,
exactly right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming towards the end of our time here, but as I forewarned you before we got on the air, I do have three questions for you. You can look through any lens you wish with these. The first one I always like to ask my guests is how your personal definition of success has changed over the years.
Yeah. I love this question because let me go back to my friend Russell.
Yes.
He and I would philosophize about success when we were in our undergraduate programs. And for me, success has always been I want to do things that are meaningful and impactful. Always, right? I mean, I have had to resist the urge to try, I've had to resist the pressure, I guess,
Hmm.
of society saying, no, success means big title, big paycheck, all of those things. Now, to be clear, I certainly have spent time in my life chasing those things
Right.
and um and and came to realization that instead of trying to be important, I really want to do important things, right? So, I success still for me means that there are people out in the world that will say, I had an interaction with Annie. Annie shared some insight with me. Annie helped me achieve ABC, XYZ. That means I have been successful, undeniably for me.
Right. I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
It's your legacy, isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
always remind myself that, at some point somebody else is going to, I hope, live in this house and all of that. But the impact you have on other people is what remains.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Uh, Second of all, I was curious if there is a book in your life that has been particularly impactful.
This is a good
And
question.
again, you can take it any direction you want, not necessarily the best book, but just one that maybe you think about from time to time.
Oh gosh. I think there's so many. This is hard.
Hmm.
I'm just going to go back to a book I read my children, which
Hmm.
I don't know. So, The Giving Tree, such a
Yep.
common book that people talk about. I don't know. I think there is just this element in me of trying, I'm not always this, but trying to be others centered and, this like, giving and providing for others. Now, obviously, in that book, in the it's kind of sad because the tree like gives everything
Yeah.
it has, and I mean, all of those things. But I don't know. I mean, there's this element of like we're all here on this earth, and if we were all here, at least putting a portion of our energy
Mhm.
into helping each other, giving to each other, and I believe in the human race, and I do think that we all do this to a large extent. Sometimes
Yes.
I think we get sideways and we get off track, and we need to refocus on, um, let's be in this together, and let's see how we can help each other. Let's lift each other up, because none of us make it through this life on our own,
Yeah.
and so let's do the work to help everybody get across the finish line in a really wonderful way.
I love it. I love it. It's a wonderful book for those who haven't read it. It is one that you read and then you think about because it applies to so many aspects of life.
Right.
My final question for you, and I always frame this a little differently for each guest, but if you were going to go on an international excursion of your dreams, I always say spouses are not, you're not allowed to answer with your good spouse. But if you could take somebody on the trip with you, they could be dead, alive, famous, not famous, somebody you know, somebody you don't know, and you get to travel with them and pick their brains for a couple of days. Who would be somebody you would love to travel with?
Hmm. Okay. Well, you know, I'm going to say my mom, and here's why.
Hmm.
My mom wanted to be a flight attendant, and so that she could travel and see the world and have these experiences. And, through a chain of events, that did not occur for her.
Hmm.
She was a teacher, so she gave back to hundreds of children and really changed their lives, and so she did some really wonderful things in her career. But now she talks about how she wishes she would have traveled more. And I would love to take her, which, by the way, we have some travel plans in the future. So I'm trying to
Wonderful.
help her fulfill these dreams now that she's retired. So, but I would take her and, help her fulfill those dreams, but also to have that dedicated time to pick her brain about her, all the things in life that we just have never sat down and talked about, and to see and experience with her the transformation that travel would have, because I know what that looks like. I know what it looks like for me. I've seen it with students and that sort of thing. So just to be in tandem with my mom having those experiences. So that's not only a hypothetical thing. We're going to make that happen. So
I love that. What a gift that will be to be able to see your mum's experience of travel like that.
yeah,
That's just
exactly.
amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Annie Munson, I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I loved it, every second of it. Thank you for letting me talk about these wonderful moments in my life. It just really brings me joy.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you again to this week's guest, and I hope today's episode was as enjoyable for you as it was for me, and perhaps even inspired your next adventure. If you did enjoy the show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can find more information at theoutdoorseyeducator.com or follow us on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. Until next time, thank you so much for listening to the Outdoorsy Educator Podcast.